Do you know Vinay?
Oh,
Oh,
no, there's John.
uh,
And we're live,
hmm,
live from the Plutopia verse. This is the Plutopia News Network. Our guest tonight is Patrick Lickney.
there
I'm
you
Sweeney, and the distinguished gentleman over there in South Austin, I believe, is John Lebkowski. Are you distinguished or extinguished?
I'm tinguished. I'm just barely tinguished.
Okay, yeah.
go.
I won't follow that one up.
No, I'm not touching that one. Yeah.
And Patrick's question for us was, do we know Vinay? And yes, we know Vinay. We interviewed him
Oh,
Yep.
some time ago.
okay.
Um,
Yeah,
I haven't talked to him in a while directly, face to face, but certainly we encounter him online quite a bit.
we got to hang out a bit when he was doing the blockchain policy for Dubai. So that was interesting. That was kind of interesting.
And we should mention that it's Vinay Gupta that we're referring
Yes,
to.
Vinay Gupta. Yes, currently in
And
London.
Vinay is definitely a blockchain maven.
Yes, he's CEO of Materium.com.
Yeah, I believe when we had
Yes.
it, putting a Stradivarius on the blockchain, was that it, John?
Yep.
That was it. Yeah. That was a predecessor of the whole NFT thing, I
Uh,
think.
uh, I think he
Uh,
I
Yep.
think he did Shatner's toupee.
Give me a second here and I will uh, share something that you
Okay.
will recognize. So there we are. This was our interview with Vinay, from global resilience to practical blockchain vision. We
Sure.
met him here. He was here in Austin for a conference, and we met and had this particular interview, which is, I think, the only time we've interviewed him, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken.
Okay. Okay. He's an interesting dude.
Well,
So,
you're
have you figured out anything useful to do with the blockchain?
Uh, well, actually, I think what Vinay was doing with Dubai was pretty practical. In other words, basically um doing governmental document indexing and that sort of thing. I thought that was actually pretty smart. So that was pretty interesting. But right at the moment, just not much more than my cat pictures.
yeah, I like the idea of the document archiving onto the blockchain because
Yeah,
that's actually a really useful thing, especially for a governmental agency or even a corporation, because these days, litigation is always lurking in the background, and someone's going to demand you produce the documents.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, if you don't lose your wallet, you're going to probably be able to do that. So, which has happened on a couple occasions. So, got something else?
What did
Well,
we?
if you're asking me, I'm actually trying to share our conversation here and there and
Okay,
invite people to
fantastic.
join us.
All
But
right.
yeah, there's probably plenty that we can talk about.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
suggested quite a few things.
I did. I did.
Migration, and immigration.
Well,
That was
I
one of the things on your list.
yeah, speaking of which, I want to wish a quick happy birthday to my dear wife who's waiting to do these things, Nagina Tasabian, who's currently still in Iran. So we keep putting on the time, but we're going to spend Christmas in Istanbul.
Sounds great. Well,
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Yep. And it's been 2 years, and so it'll be a good reunion. So that's the thing there. So
Do you want to talk about that at all? About what's been
well,
happening there?
I mean, really, what's going on is we're just stuck in the queue, and my senator Amy Klobuchar's head the immigration subcommittee, and I've been kind of active with the local and with the state Democratic Party and that sort of thing. I'm very active with the party now. And I got to meet Senator Klobuchar at a fundraiser this week, so I'm hoping maybe we can do something. We'll see. So I actually got to meet her, and I got to meet our representative who's on the Republican Party, Finstad, and I'm just basically banging on the wall whenever I can. Want her to come home.
Well, down
So,
here in Texas, migration is, of course, uh, a really big subject, and they've just, they're constantly, trying to pass new legislation here in Texas to, keep everyone out and,
sure, sure, sure.
keep the Republicans out, but they keep they keep showing up.
Well, this kind of brings me on to kind of like a framing mechanism for this evening, is that we've got another good friend, Derek Woodgate, who kind of got me interested in this stuff called strategic foresight. What was it? Strategic foresight analysis and that sort of thing, using various tools and such to try to look at the future. And that got me to go to the and this is just dipping my pinky in the pool, I mean, nothing more than that, where Derek's, he runs the entire lab and works with the Saudis and that sort of thing. But I've been trying to do a little bit of study on it. But I took some, their little introductory classes on strategic foresight. And one thing I thought was really interesting was it says that there are basically four main indicators: mega trends, weak indicators like the 2008 financial derivatives and that sort of thing that everybody saw coming, but it was just kind of under the radar. And then also black swans like the pandemic. So it's like so one of the
things
mega
you don't see coming.
Yeah. So I looked at this idea of megatrends, and I thought one of the things that was basically, I think there's four major ones. There's urbanization, humanization of the landscape, technology, ubiquity of technology, and then also migration, which I think is really interesting. So the thing is, we're seeing it on the southern border. Where the thing is that in my talking with people and that sort of thing about trying to get various visas and all that sort of thing, I'm noticing that about half of Schengen is just overloaded, with people coming in, trying to come in from the east and that sort of thing, from everywhere from like Syria, Lebanon, Ukraine, Armenia, all that sort of thing, and and even places like Iran and that sort of thing. I think that's kind of interesting, and it's and we see these things in America too. And I think the one thing I think that's really interesting about this, as far as a future trend, is that we tend to see some of these things as specific to America, but these are global.
Oh yeah.
And, so there are a lot of people who are trying to come to America, but there are a lot of people who are trying to go to a lot of places. And it's I think the one thing that's really kind of interesting here is that I think we're sort of seeing maybe a strange end to American exceptionalism on a lot of things. And the one thing that another framing mechanism that I kind of thought of here is that just a couple of days ago, I saw something that Vinay put up, and he said, the old modern world is gone. And he thought that, a new one is coming, and it's basically, he felt that, we have to make some decisions as to what that is what constitutes the value of a life, whether it's, a Western one, an Eastern one, or even a human one or non-human one. And, in other words, when I look at things kind of at a metastructural level, this looks like a kind of a values conversation. And, what do we as a species hold important? And, I think this is interesting. And I have
Well, we're not very consistent about that, are we?
no. And yeah, it's kind of like on one hand we all signed the 2015 Paris Accord, and according to the New York Times the other day, I'm firing a lot of stuff out to put it on the table, that the Western world by 2030, we're looking to double our carbon output. So what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to kind of set up a little bit of a strange scenario, and then maybe work through it and maybe find some interesting probabilities that aren't necessarily that dark. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. And
Yeah.
in,
What
in
do you think?
the United States, there are a lot of people who want to do away with the new modern world and return us to feudalism, I guess. It's like people really want to turn the clock back.
Well, as Mel Brooks said, it's good to be king. You know.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we don't really think enough about what it means to have borders.
Yeah, and that's
We
kind
just sort of, it's an assumed thing. It's presumed that we have these borders, and people talk about, like, does the United States have open borders? Which, of course, it does not.
no.
But if it has borders for sure, the borders are managed and regulated. And why, what determines who's in and who's out, and whether you can cross the border or not? And what does it mean to have the border? I mean, having this border, there's an assumption of property.
Yes.
There's an assumption that there's some, a sense of ownership, obviously, and a sense of governance over a particular area of land.
Sure.
And some people would like to enter that land and they can't, or they are not permitted to.
I hear you there.
That's what you're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we really have to examine, and we really have to think about what that means, and whether it makes sense to have a border policy of one kind or another. I mean, we really don't have, there hasn't been a renewal of the conversation about border policy within our legislatures, even though there's constant talk about it and complaints about it. And I know that, like, the Republican right-wing crazy guys are kind of going nuts over, we have open borders, people are coming through, fentanyl is coming through. Most, kind of BS, because that's not exactly true. It is true that some people get through the borders, though. But the whole conversation should be like, what policy should we have about those borders?
Right.
We don't really, it doesn't make sense to completely just shut them down. But it also, there's a question about, I mean, if you open the border, if you really had open borders, we might be overrun. Is that a possibility?
That's complex. I think probably not.
Indeed.
I think probably not. But also, on the other hand, if we almost start thinking about calculus, if we start having too much of a rate of input of people, is that we wind up with with a lot of imbalances and that sort of thing, and then that creates that'll create social disturbance, and it's just a matter that I don't think immigration is bad. I think it's just a matter of, say, for example, you have a lot of people coming in from one place or another. Is who are they, and how are they going to integrate into the population and things like that, or if they intend to. And it's I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that there is an impact, there is a change. And what does that change? And then how does that affect things? I think that the way that the right wing expresses that is really distorted.
Well, their apparent concern is that people of color will come into the United States through these borders
God
and
forbid.
become voters here and start voting against them, and they're the great replacement theory, the sense that they're going to be replaced by these people. I mean, what's been happening over the years is that minority populations have been growing, certainly happening in Texas and other places too.
Right.
And at some point, people who are white people who felt that America is a land of white people were
Right.
starting to freak out over this idea that, we have different kinds of people coming in, different cultures being represented. And there was a philosophy of opening up to that. I certainly can embrace in a multicultural philosophy. But I'm sensitive to the fact that there are people who are totally freaked out by the idea,
Whole idea
and no, we haven't figured out how to have a conversation about it. Yes, Scoop. What? Sorry.
idea of the border didn't really become a big political football until 9/11. That's when everyone became totally frightened that people were going to start, little 9/11 attacks from all of these foreign countries.
Foreigners.
I grew up in Texas, and the border with the Texas and Mexico was a very loosey-goosey kind of thing. People that live right on the border routinely would be going back and forth casually. They just walk across the Rio Grande where it be walked across. And they had businesses on both sides of the border, and it was a very friendly kind of thing.
Yeah.
They had the Bracero program, which actually allowed people from Mexico to come in, work in agriculture, and then return with their money that they earned to Mexico. It was not a big deal. But when politicians decided that they had to put a stop to this because all these non-white folks were coming over, that's pretty much destroyed all of these communities along the border that used to have great relations with the people on both sides.
Well, I don't know. Being that I'm quite familiar with Texas for a long period of time, is that and as well as other things with borders. By the way, I'll just kind of mention that the idea of our conventional set of nation states and borders and that sort of thing was really kind of invented in 1748. I think 1748 with the Treaty of Westphalia, which was wonderfully depicted on Saturday Night Live, when they kind of doled out stuff and that sort of thing, and then also further problematized after World War One. The Sykes-Picot Treaty, was it 18 or 19, which carved up the Middle East, which is part of our problem today. But it's yeah, exactly. It's this politicizing the. I think. Well, the thing is that what politicizing the border does is that politicizes the immigrant body, and the idea of if you think about the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was this sort of concern of Northern European residents, about Southern European residents and Irish and things like that. So, and this was a different culture. This was a different socioeconomic class, different, Catholic versus Protestant and that sort of thing. So, I mean, it was another shift, and this sort of fear was in place as well.
Yeah. Great way of gaining political power or financial power is to other the other. I mean, they're the evil ones, and we need to give me money or give me political power so I can fight them off. That's a common theme, especially in this country.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and somehow we got to get people on the same page, and it's tough. I mean, right now it looks pretty tough. You've got a terrible polarization in this country.
Yeah.
and it's feeding on itself. And it's we blame the right, but the left is implicated too.
Sure.
And we really don't have the problem that we have is that the volume is turned way up on the extremes. And most people are not that extreme, right? Most people, they want to live their lives and they're happy to let other people live their lives too, right?
Yeah.
And they're not, they're not carrying a chip on their shoulder. They're not carrying along some pronounced political agenda. They are living the life that they know how to live. And they're, when they vote the best they can for what they believe in. And their beliefs are based to some extent on the information that they're able to get. And right now, the information environment is chaotic. So it's harder for people to get a real handle on what they want to do. But, there's an assumption that because we hear a lot of loud ranting from the right, that the right is gaining power. But yesterday's election showed us that may not be true.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there could be a backlash against that stuff because the problem is that as people get power, they tend to start misusing it. And it starts to be more and more obvious, and they get cocky about it. And I think what's happening on the right now is that they're really starting to show the how empty their agenda really is.
Mm-hmm.
They're only trying to take power. They're not trying to do effective governance. They're not trying to manage the country or to manage the economy. They're not doing any of that stuff. They're just talking. They're just performing, and that's going to blow up in their faces.
Well, they're trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
That's primarily it, and that sort of thing. So, well, here's a strange thing: is that do you think that AI is going to save us from that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it couldn't go.
What could go wrong?
Did you see the Andreessen manifesto saying that technology is gonna is fantastic, it's gonna save us and all that sort of thing, and I believe it. The one thing I think is really interesting right now about AI is that I do terribly strange things with it. Right now I've been doing apocalyptic cats, and just seeing if I throw it some strange things, see how left to center it'll go driving, and it goes pretty far. And
are you using some generative AI system to create images?
Yeah. Let's see here. Right now I'm going between I'm going and using Midjourney, Dolly, and actually, this is the thing that I think is strange, is that generative AI has been integrated into all the Adobe graphic products, and I do you find this really and then guess what? Within the last week, mobile Facebook Messenger allows you to generate stickers in the Messenger. So and so I don't know. I just feel like AI is being integrated into everything, and this has only been a year.
Well, there's a real question about whether that stuff really is AI. Well, whether it is some artificial intelligence or whether it's just a way to take your query and give a response that, well, in the case of generative text AI, they're trying to be conversational, right? So they've learned how to algorithmically provide a conversational response, and that's pretty sophisticated stuff right now, but it doesn't mean there's a real intelligence there.
No, it's just generally
you're making a query and you're getting a response.
Really?
You want to show us something you've done?
Oh my Lord.
Can you share an image?
Let me see. Here's a,
Can you show us a cat
oh,
or some such?
yeah, let me see if I can pull some of that up. Is that I have some colleagues around here who've been I've been doing a lot of research with Winona State, where I'm at, does a lot of AI research, and we're partners with a place called the Center for Digital Narrative over at the University of Oregon. And I got my colleague Talon Mehmet, and we got buddies like like Scott Retberg and Jason Nelson, who are doing a lot of interesting stuff. But um, let's see here. Let me see if I can find this thing. Scott Retberg had been doing these things called, the Fin du Monde series, which I think are really kind of interesting. I got kind of inspired by that, and there are two things that are going on with that. Is that I did a let's see here, where is this thing? I have a show that's going around called Studio Visits, which is basically this whole uh, exhibition of empty studios that I started generating. With AI, and which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. But and then I created an entire catalog with the thing, saying that, what, if AI is going to get rid of artists, then why don't we just take care of this? And I'll be the curator of these artificial artists, and it's currently on display at let's see, it's currently on display at UC Berkeley. But the thing that I've been doing lately is that Retberg has been doing these things called the Fin du Monde series and the End of the World series, and I got inspired by those, and then just started saying, well, what if there's a end of the world with sort of like a Godzilla sort of. Oh, wait a second. I need to.
Here's some questions for you.
Okay. Well, I have the other ones here. Let's go do that.
I did that just for fun. Yeah, here we go.
No. Let's why don't we answer those real quick?
Well, we can do that. Let's see.
Or is that interesting? Are those questions interesting?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they're broad. I mean, what inspires you to create digital art is a pretty broad question, right?
Yeah.
And how do you use technology to create your art? We could probably talk about that for hours.
Yeah, I know. And
challenges and rewards of working with digital media.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
how accurate is this? It says your art often explores themes of identity, memory, and the relationship between humans and technology. Do you think that's accurate as a description of your art?
It's about,
because if it is, that means Google Bard knows you.
Well, it's been good at scraping me. So it's been good at scraping me. So why don't we look at some strange things?
Yeah, let's look at some real stuff. Yeah.
Let's look at some strange. So here we go. Here's
I like that.
Here are these things.
Wow, that's amazing.
Here's some things I call the catastrophes. And so, as opposed to the end of the world, so I'm just kind of saying that this is a medieval scenario with giant cats on the prowl for snacks, terrorizing people.
Is that Mid-Journey stuff?
Yeah, it is.
Is that where that's coming from? Okay.
Yep. And some of these are really kind of heroic, It's like
cats in my life, and some of these guys look familiar.
Yeah.
By my own cats many times.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I love this one.
Yeah, it's this. By the way, this is my favorite here. No, wait, no. This is my favorite. We'll get that in a second. This one's good? And
ooh,
some of these things are like very Brugelian. That's a look at that. He got 5-6 paws. That sort of thing.
So how complex is the prompt to generate an image like that?
Less than here. This is my favorite. I just basically turned this into a.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, And I love the guy's face, and I love the cat's got 5 paws and he's got 6 fingers, which is definitely an AI thing. And it's just chaos. And there's a slab of meat on the table, and the cat's coming to get it. And it's just got a lot of affective quality to it. And but um
Looks like kind of a nouveau Jesus and cat.
yeah, exactly. What was the question, John, you just asked?
I was just asking about the complexity of the prompt required to
Oh,
generate
I
this
mean,
image.
uh long sentence, not a paragraph. And
I mean, the
it's
prompts that I've written to generate images have not generated such great images. They
yeah.
certainly haven't looked as real as these, and it makes me wonder whether my prompts are just, way too simple.
Well, on one hand, this is an oil painting style. And
Yeah. Okay.
the other thing is here's something interesting. I do not have this image. So the different engines, say for example, like Midjourney, you can go back to version 3, version 4, version 5.1, and 5.2. And they put out some very different things. So I took and had the Trinity Blast redone, and one just came up looking like something almost like a expressionist thing. The other thing was almost kind of like a Disney sort of illustration. The other thing was something that was almost photographic, and so oh, that's a good one. And so this is, I think what's interesting here is that we have, these translators. We have the the latent space, or the database that it's working with, and then how it's shaped by how we like it, which I call the culture of like. In other words, so we've got these two things that create this set of probabilities, but then it's shaped again by the way we respond to it. I think that's really interesting. So, and that's very discursive, I think. um and but the thing,
Oh,
yeah, that's a good one. um Let me see. There's
wow, that looks like Vivek Ramaswamy.
yeah, right, exactly. And that's that's pretty good. I love the cat. I love the claustrophobic nature of some of these things, and that's kind of Catzilla. But what happens is that we wind up seeing these things, and we wind up seeing these things in all of our media. And really, what's this going to do to what's this going to do to our society?
Yeah,
You
I have
know,
a bunch of artist friends who are becoming very irate because they're seeing their actual works appear in some
yeah,
of the images that are being generated, and you know, the, it's inevitable that there will be the court cases of plagiarism and copyright infringement and that kind of thing, and
sure.
that
But-
will be good for some people, but it'll definitely put a crimp into the in any progress in AI.
Right. I mean, and also the other thing, did you see when the Warhol Foundation lost against the Prince Trust,
Mm.
for the use of that image of Prince, and basically saying that Warhol used it for the same intention that the photographer did, for for a representation of Prince, and for essentially for profit. The thing is that feeds into AI, and the one thing I think is interesting is that you cannot copyright AI images. Now we're only talking about images. I'm just starting to play around with Google's um, Google's Audio Lab, and generating music with that, which is really kind of MIDI-ish, from the 90s. You can kind of understand
I
that,
tried that.
you know.
How is that uh, done? That's a new one. Audio is my thing. That's what
Yeah,
I'm
and
doing.
and then a friend of mine, my friend Talon Mehmet, he's done something amazing. he's taken speeches that he's done. He's a he's an amazing person. He's learning to live with a tracheotomy, and he's trained AI voice models, with his prior voice and using it in his video art. And I think that's really amazing, actually. Um, so that's, he's been doing amazing work doing that. And then, and then also the text-based stuff, that's really a little bit scary at that point. There you go. There's
This is
something.
the sort of thing that I end up with, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you know what? That's maybe something I wish I'd wind up with. So
Well, I don't know. I mean, it to me it looks a little, amateurish, I guess.
you know
But
what?
let me see if I can find. So I have another good one here. Let's see. Um, Give me a chance
Actually,
to share. I will show you this. This one I kind of like.
that's kind of neat.
Don't you wish you were there right now?
Hmm. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
A hard gym and rock and roll band on a floating stage
Yep.
is what that's supposed to be. I guess that's the band back here.
There you go. Maybe that's a
Yeah.
discussion we ought to have at another time on another thing with our VR goddess of all time, Brenda Laurel.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that'd be
You
an
know,
interesting.
we haven't had Brenda on the podcast. I just realized that.
You know what? You really
It would
should.
absolutely make sense to have her here. Yeah.
So the one thing that I tried just for kicks is that I tried to have Chat GPT write a college essay for me. And I got that to do, and then I
Mm-hmm.
had to try to grade it.
Mm.
So I hope you see the irony of that. In other words, we're trying in the academy trying to deal with this idea of students dealing with AI, but the whole thing is that I just see this kind of interesting sort of recursion of button pushing, and then um but then my friend who runs the fish farm south of Dhaka in Bangladesh, is probably going to be coming up a little short shrift, don't you think?
Yeah.
And this is kind of what I think Vinay is. I'm looping back. I'm kind of what Vinay is starting to look at, and there was like sort of looking at kind of the cloud minder society, and the thing I think is very interesting is that part of what I was getting at here is that, what was it? I think this is kind of what I call exponentialist culture. And there's this idea of something that expands so fast that it overwhelms everything. So I think that kind of started first with the idea of the metaverse. Well, it started with NFTs and crypto. Of course, when Bitcoin, shot up so high. And then, merging that with VR, which of course Zuckerberg wanted to do to create the metaverse. And then, which then, reinforces the blockchain. And then on top of that, we have this stuff with AI. And I think what we have is we have this cascade of technological advances that are moving so fast that the technocrats involved at the top are taking advantage of that exponential speed and leverage to basically just come through and just sweep through everything while everybody's dazzled and don't know really what's happening yet. And I think this is kind of an interesting thing that has a potential for transforming Western, first world culture. And the thing is that, I don't look at, the idea of crypto, blockchain, VR, metaverse, AI as one thing. I'm looking at it as a chain of techno tsunamis, which I think could possibly really transform Western culture.
Do you think the transformation will be positive or negative? Because transformations can go either way, and some of these things, I have friends who invested heavily in cryptocurrency, and they're now living in cardboard boxes, basically, because
Well,
it.
hopefully they're very nice. With their very nice cardboard boxes. But well, this is the thing, isn't it? This is the thing with that exponentialism. This is the thing. It goes up the asymptote, and then it either evens out or it crashes. It's a spike, and one leads to another, leads to another, and well, this leads to another little philosophical thing that's going on. Is that, I mean, say for example, and I really cannot comment on the Middle East at this time, just because of the fact that I have too much invested
Right.
on both sides, and I really can't comment on it. Even though I am an activist and I do have my opinions, but I really can't comment in public. I think that part of what I go back to this idea in foresight studies. There was like this idea of probabilities, and part of this is based on taking our values and putting it into possibilities and trying to, kind of skew the probabilities of a future. And this is something that I thought was a really interesting proposition that the Dubai Future Foundation put forward. So when I look at this, I look at, the current, technoculture. And the one thing is almost like sort of like the cyborg culture. And this is actually something I'm kind of pointing back to, something you and I have talked to a great deal, John. This idea of our interweaving with technology. But I think what happens is that cyber culture at this point is so woven in with a sense of, cynical pessimism. And I think that's built from like the echo chamber. I'm wondering whether the choice to have an aggressive sense of hope, as a willful sense of hope, which is almost, an irrational sense, an irrational hopefulness, to be something that could possibly inspire other people, to say that, we don't have to be, involved in this, in this incredibly negative, snarky space, where we just kind of say, it doesn't matter, nothing matters, and it's all going to crash anyway, and let's just, fire off some shit posting. But the thing is that saying, well, I think there's a difference between that and being practical and look at the facts and say, things do not look so great. But also, on the other hand, is that if we don't imagine, other futures like Fuller wrote about, we're going to go there. In other words, if we give up and say, what, we're screwed, well, we are.
Well, I think it's a question of power, really.
Political
well, not just political power, but personal power.
Yeah.
I was listening to a conversation the other day. It was like a recent podcast episode that Doug Rushkoff did with Mitch Horowitz.
Okay, yeah.
And Horowitz was kind of talking about, the question about whether it's realistic and rational to wish for something, and whether wishes can actually, whether you can manifest your wish.
What Doug said.
And I think there's, it's a discussion to have about how you take power to make a thing happen.
Right.
There's kind of an almost occult sense around the right-wing thing that's been happening. And there was someone, I had read something once about the question about like whether Donald Trump was actually influenced by the occult, but a fairly broad sense of the occult is just being able to take power or persuade or to, get people to follow you, that sort of thing. I mean, there's a kind of mojo to that, really, to be able to form a cult like Trump has done. So why don't we form a very positive cult
The
you know,
Plutopian
to
cult.
yeah, the Plutopia cult. We joke about how we'd really like to get our cult going, you know,
Yeah.
but and I don't know that it's. I mean, it's not us specifically, but I would certainly like to think that I could pull together whatever psychic energy I have and commit it to the manifestation of something that is more for the good of all. You know, kind of try
Yeah.
to create manifest a social good rather than manifesting an evil sort of
Yeah.
uh, outcome that is totally self-serving. I mean, I think a lot of the problem of evil really is related to the problem of complete selfishness and completely self-serving acts. So
You know
you
what?
take somebody like, famously, Trump is like that. He like everything he does, he tries to do it to his own benefit. A more saintly person, it would be like everything they do, they try to do for the benefit of as many as possible, right?
Right, right. I think one thing that you're talking about here makes a very good point. In other words, the idea of someone who is self-centered as being something that's a very concrete thing, as opposed to evil, which is very metaphysical and indistinct. So the one thing is that I think that if we kind of look at things in terms of these concrete notions and think about, how these, how we can engage with them, as opposed to saying, oh, that's just evil. I think that is something where we can have a foothold.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a question of who benefits. And the
Hmm.
problem I have, I don't really have a problem with Republicans as Republicans. I mean,
Sure.
the certainly what they were before, anyway, or the idea of being a conservative or whatever. But what I see today within that party and within the areas where they have been able to take power, they're not working for the common good. They're not working for, they're not trying to do effective governance or to like manage things effectively. They're mainly just out doing performative bullshit to try to accelerate their own power, you know?
It's ideology.
And yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it's not just ideology, it's actually sort of like pure will to be greedy, you know?
yeah, I don't even see it as being the Republican Party anymore. I grew up in a heavy Republican
Yeah.
household, and that was the old Republicans that, they cared about business
Yeah.
and saving money and all that good stuff. But they really need to just give it the name that it deserves, and that's the Fascist Party.
Mhm.
People have been trying to do a fascist party in the United States since 1920s, and they're getting close to it now.
That's very interesting. And I mean, it leads me to think of how, how we're, you know, how we're going to lead our lives. I mean, say for example, I think about automation and whether that's actually going to cause a, kind of a general minimum income. And I'm reading Marx for Cats, which is basically talking about species class struggle between cats and people. But you know, and so anyway,
That's very interesting. You know,
it's a
I'm
it's a
reading
new
a
book.
science fiction.
It's a new
I was
book.
going to say I'm reading a science fiction novel that has characters in it that are animals, basically, but
Yeah,
they're intelligent animals and they're part of the community.
yeah, but it's very funny is that Marx expressed as cat human species dialectics, and and maybe some of the hope is through this idea of taking these what Gibson would call lateral strategies, and it's like they and I think was it in Idoru or it's something somewhere in the bridge thing talking about people going lateral in a in a riot or something like that, meaning going in a direction that you don't imagine. I mean that and the thing is, I don't say for good or for bad. I think I think this is kind of a little too easy. I think the idea of that saying that in many ways, I sometimes think the notion of good or evil has become too simplistic. It's especially with the series of wars going on at the moment. The idea of saying that these people are good and those people are bad, and there's this black and white. I'm looking at this thing almost like seeing, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, seeing a 20-sided die, and just saying 20-sided dice, and saying, hey, that's good. Oh my God.
Remember the Alamo.
The old ones remember the Alamo. Oh my God, I've spent so
That's
much.
something that Bruce Sterling posted on Flickr. I'm not sure what the source is.
There you go. That had come from Bruce, definitely. That's great. I love it. So, what's Bruce been saying about this sort of thing lately?
I don't know. I haven't been talking to him. But we'll be talking soon. We'll have our State of the World in January.
That's true.
I'm sure there'll be a lot to say.
I know. Well, the thing I think is interesting, and this is why, I kind of brought up this idea for moving forward, looking forward, is the fact that there's just been so much change in 2023. And, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether people are going to enjoy this talk, or whether it's, or whether we've got bright and dark spots. But, I'm just wondering about, really kind of where we've been. And, and we have some things like, NFTs. Believe it or not, NFTs are not dead. They're not dead. I think everybody thinks they're dead. And I think, I'll tell you what, I'm in the fine art world, and there are a lot of people trading this stuff around. There are a lot of groups that are based off of different forms of NFTs. It's definitely still a thing. And the Tezos Foundation made a agreement with a number of European museums, to work with blockchain art. There are a number of shows up at the moment. Tina Rivers Ryan at the Albright Knox in Buffalo is very much behind this sort of thing. She's one of the senior curators there. This is very interesting, but but then on the other hand, this notion of the metaverse, that seemed to have gone real sideways now, don't you think?
Well, get Zuckerberg.
Well,
does go sideways on almost anything he's involved with. The meta.
Zuckerberg.
The metaverse. I mean, it's never going to be broad. It's going to be more niche, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's going to be people who want to be in 3D virtual realities, or, if not true three-dimensional, but, simulated three-dimensional or whatever, something like Second Life. And we talked to Jim Al not long ago, and he has written this book about the metaverse.
I love that book.
Yeah, and it's clear that there's a large number of people who are making use of what you would call metaverse technologies, things like Roblox and Fortnite and Second Life and so forth.
Yep.
But if Zuckerberg thought that the average housewife who uses Facebook to connect with her friends is going to want to go into some kind of metaverse and hang out there, I think he was sorely mistaken. I think that it's telling that early on, when people were first starting to talk about VR and trying to create fairly complex environments, that the more popular, probably the most popular mode of communication through the internet was text. Yes. Just plain text.
Yeah.
I think people really want to have a degree of simplicity in the way that they're connecting, and they don't want something that's heavy, or that and that's liable to be bandwidth intensive. And that's liable to be slow, and that's liable to be clunky, and that's where you manifest as something that doesn't look quite human. versus just reading somebody's words,
Yeah.
sharing experiences through text.
Well, John,
Learning.
So,
the smartphones are, the way people use smartphones are a good example of, they don't really call on the voice function, that you could actually make phone calls on those smartphones.
What?
It's amazing. But most people are using text. And it's amazing how that has become, the primary method of communication by that phone.
Yeah.
well, we've had funny situations with, like, my wife and I, where she'll like be sending somebody a text to find out, are we going to meet in an hour or something like that? And say, man, I hope they see the text and respond. I say, why don't you just call them? And then she looks at me and she says, that's really funny coming from you,
Yeah,
because she
right.
kind of expects me to be the one who wants to leverage the internet based technology. But, sometimes the phone call makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, see that what's really interesting to me is that consider when I'm talking with my family, they're behind firewalls and that sort of thing. So, we there's a couple of programs we're able to use. But the thing is, I'm unable to use video most of the time, so we're either texting or using audio. So, I mean, this is what's practical, you know. So I actually do use it as a phone, actually,
I
so
do. Uh,
The interesting thing I'm seeing, the trend that I'm seeing is away from big into more small and niche. You know, instead of getting on one big like Facebook kind of thing where everybody's there, you're trying to like
mm,
hold a large number of people, large number of connections, and so forth. Going onto something like Discord where there's just a few people
yeah,
hanging out, or going into like, instead of having Twitter being this big centralized
yeah,
system where everybody shows up and you see all the journalists and you see all the celebrities and so forth.
yeah,
Now people are going to Mastodon,
yeah,
and it's, Mastodon is a more complex structure in a sense, in that there are a lot of servers and they're not all necessarily
yeah.
sharing everything,
Federated
and but
cyberspace.
you're able, yeah, and you're able to find the people that you need to find. I mean, you can have a great experience on Mastodon. The people I know are saying, "Wow, this is like what we really thought the internet was going to be."
well, I discovered a venue that surprised me. It's called a bar, and
Oh,
I go
There
out
you go.
the actual human beings and partake in fermented vegetable products. The
oh,
great invention. I wonder if it's going to catch on.
yeah, I hear that's been around for a while.
It's been
It's
known to
been around.
happen.
I hear it's been around at least since 2004.
Really?
Yeah. So,
So we've got a
yeah.
few minutes left. What's your departing wisdom for
Oh,
us?
my departing wisdom. Well, no, wisdom is nothing that, yeah, especially my students, I think they're kind of crazy for talking to me for wisdom. But anyway, but what happens is, which probably makes me a decent professor. I don't know. Well, I think what has gone on is that I like to go back to a story that, John was at, when we were at the EFF party at South by. And Bruce just kind of
Mhm.
says, like, you know what, this isn't the dystopia that I wrote about. And this is something that, and the thing that I think about is that I think that when we think of the idea of the future, I think something that's a relatively new thing, and I think is really, really interesting, called, paleo future studies. And the idea of what the future, in other words, like the future isn't what it used to be. And, you know, and so what happens, I think part of the questions I was, thinking about and asking was the matter of saying, what was the future now as opposed to what it was? And I think as opposed to 2001: A Space Odyssey, we're now thinking about AI, and it's like, whether crypto technology, blockchain technology is actually going to take hold. And really, I think, in short, I think AI is going to transform a lot of things. It reminds me of an event very similar to that when my father, retired over computers coming to his insurance office. And I think this is as big of a shift. It's as big of a shift as as smartphones,
Yeah.
um, and social media. I think bigger actually. But the thing is that I'm just kind of wondering how big the disruption is going to be, and it'll change. It's definitely going to change things. But I'm just kind of wondering, whether it's going to, how it's going to shift employment, world markets, and so on. And so anyway, have I rattled on for too long? Should I just shut her down?
We just
Not too long, but we have reached the end.
had to,
Okay.
we're
Well,
all
I think
on
I
this.
think what goes on is that I think, hey gang, see you later. I think the future isn't what we used to think it was. I think it's going to be interesting, and I think we should have hope for it, but keep our eyes wide open.
That's right. That's right. Well,
Yeah,
it was great to see you. Great to talk to you. And
yeah,
let's do it again soon.
awesome. Okay, man. Thanks
Good.
so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Adios.
Adios.